Distinguished Senator from Missouri, Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Chairman. Admiral Richardson, I want to talk a little bit about aircraft. I know that your predecessor had real concerns about how we were managing our tactical aviation shortfall. I think Secretary Carter's also expressed some concerns, Secretary Mavis, to you about that topic, and I'm sure others as well, but I did notice that one. And I'm grateful that the Navy has added 2 Super Hornets in FY17 and 14 and 18, assuming that would happen in 18. It's also added money to try to extend the lifetime of that fleet from 6,000 hours to 9,000 hours. One, your sense of whether extending the life is what is the best thing to do here, and another, how many Super Hornets do you think the Navy needs to support the fleet, and how many do you have?
Sir, I'll get back to you with the exact numbers. You know, the total buy for aircraft, right now we're in the position where, I'll just address the strike fighter inventory problem writ large, if you will. And it's really kind of a 3-vector approach that we are using to reconstitute our strike fighter inventory and increase the number of ready basic aircraft. One is that we're recovering from the depot backlog of the legacy Hornets. And so, that backlog came about for a number of reasons. One, we discovered some maintenance areas on the aircraft that we didn't expect, and so we had a bigger job on our hands. And then the impact of sequestration, hiring freezes, those sorts of things also slowed that down. But we are right now hiring artisans to improve the throughput of our depots. We've also brought on some private sector help in Boeing and L3 to help us increase the throughput. And the 17 budget funds that aviation depot at pretty much the maximum capacity that they can put things through. So part of our program is to get those aircraft through their depot period. Because those aircraft are backed up, the legacy Hornets, we've been flying the Super Hornet more to maintain the readiness of our pilots. And so those aircraft are getting to the end of life faster. And so, as you pointed out, we've got a request in both 17 and 18 to buy some Super Hornets to make up for those losses and that increased use of that aircraft. The buy in 17, we expect could be supplemented by some foreign sales as well. And if not, just below the cut line on our unfunded list would be a buy to keep that
line open.
Open, yes,
Right.
sir.
Let me ask another question here. Do you still believe, as your predecessor did, that the Growler, which is that same airplane differently equipped, is likely to be a long-term part of any flying package because of its disruptive capabilities?
Absolutely. It's part of getting our aircraft into the 5th generation of warfare.
I have one final question. I might have a couple more for the record, but I have one final question for both General Neller and Admiral Richardson. So Senator Gillibrand and I introduced some legislation last year called the Military Family Stability Act, which would just provide more flexibility for families who need to move early or stay a little bit later for work or educational reasons. I know that both of you, as many other people, will argue forever that the strength of the military is the families of the military. And as more families have, more spouses have professional obligations, what happens to them also matters, I think, as to whether or not people stay in the military, whether you could move your kids a month earlier or keep them at a school a month later, while the service person, first of all, would look at any available single sailor ability on the new post. And I just wonder if either of you have either a personal sense of when this might have made a big difference in your career, or how you feel about looking at families and the professional spouse different, and the working spouse, different than perhaps we did in the past. General?
Senator, I think we all recognize that the situation we have with our families is different than what it was 10 or 15 years ago, and that the spouse may have a career. And so we try our very, very best to work with every service member, every Marine, to ensure that we take that into account. There are some difficulties with that, particularly if they're living on base housing. Living out in town, they have a lot more flexibility. And we also are looking at, do we really need to move people to the degree and to the rate that we move them? Because it costs us money. That said, there's an advantage to having Marines go and see different parts of the Marine Corps as opposed to stay in one single geographical area. So there's a balance there. But I can tell you is we are very conscious of working with every Marine and their families and try to do what's right by them because we want them to stay. And so we continue to work on that. And as part of my discussion with our staff is, you know, we don't need to move people just to move people. And if there's ways to keep people in a certain location longer that's going to be more cost effective and beneficial to the family, then we certainly need to take a look at that.
Admiral?
Sir, we've moved 21 times in our 33-year career, you know, with 5 kids, and my wife is piling up the score for sainthood. You know, the family dynamic has changed. There's just a lot more working spouses than there were when we first got into this. That's just the facts of the matter. I agree with General Neller's approach. We are taking really a comprehensive approach to this dynamic because whether a move of any type is disruptive to a family, and if we can minimize the amount of moves and let people pursue their careers with fewer moves, then that would be something that we're looking at very hard. I very much appreciate your interest in making sure that we make that transition as smooth as possible, and looking forward to working with you to get into the details of that, and particularly addressing this new dynamic of working spouses.
Right. Thank you, Chairman.